The piano keys were yellowed with age, silent under a thin layer of dust that caught the afternoon light streaming through the Victorian windows. I hadn't expected to find it here in my father's old music room, tucked away in the bench where sheet music should have been. The house had been empty for 3 months since his passing, and I had been putting off this final room. The one where he spent countless evenings playing Chopin and Debussy, where the walls still seemed to hum with melodies that would never be played again. The real estate agent had called twice this week, eager to schedule the final walkthrough, but something had kept drawing me back to this room, to this piano, that had been the heart of our home for as long as I could remember. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet as I approached the old, upright Steinway, its mahogany finish dulled but still beautiful in the golden light. My fingers traced the familiar path along its edge, remembering how I used to sit beside him on this same bench when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, trying to follow his gentle guidance as he taught me scales and simple melodies. The scent of old wood and forgotten music hung in the air, mixing with the faint cologne he always wore. Something warm and comforting that made every room feel like safety. I lifted the bench seat, expecting to find his collection of Bach inventions and Mozart sonatas, the same pieces he had been playing since before I was born. Instead, my hands found something unexpected, a single envelope, cream-coloured and soft with age, with handwriting across the front that made my heart skip. Written in his careful script, in the same hand that had signed countless birthday cards and report cards, were 2 words that took my breath away. For Sarah. My name. My father's handwriting. An envelope I had never seen before. The paper felt fragile between my fingers, as if it had been waiting here for years. Decades, maybe, growing more delicate with each passing season. I sank onto the piano bench, the same bench where we had shared so many quiet afternoons, and turned the envelope over. The seal had never been broken. Whatever words lay inside had never been read, never been received, never travelled from his heart to mine, despite bearing my name. The silence in the room felt different now. Not empty, but full of possibility, heavy with the weight of unspoken words. Outside, autumn leaves drifted past the windows like golden snow, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the faint sound of children playing in the park where he used to take me to feed the ducks. The whole world seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for me to bridge the gap between what was written and what was known. My hands trembled as I carefully opened the envelope, trying not to tear the delicate paper that had guarded its secret for so long. Inside was a single sheet of his personal stationery, the kind with his name embossed at the top in simple, elegant lettering. The ink had faded to a soft brown, but his words were still clear, still unmistakably his voice speaking across whatever chasm of time had kept this letter hidden. At the top of the page was a date that made everything inside me go still. June 3rd, 1995, my wedding day. The day I married David in the garden behind this very house, with white roses climbing the arbour and my father playing piano during the ceremony. The day when everything in my life changed, when I stopped being just his daughter and became someone's wife, someone who would build a life in another city, in another world from the one we had shared. I took a shaky breath and began to read. My dearest Sarah, tonight you are sleeping upstairs in your childhood bedroom for the last time as Sarah Mitchell, and tomorrow you will wake up as Sarah Coleman, ready to start a life I can only imagine from the stories you've told me about David and the dreams you've shared. I have been sitting at this piano for hours, playing all the songs that remind me of you, for Elise, because it was the first piece you ever learned all the way through. And Claire de Lune, because you said it sounded like moonlight feels. I started this letter a dozen times over the past month, crumpling page after page, because no words seemed adequate for what I wanted to say to you before you begin this new chapter. How do you tell your daughter everything your heart holds when she's about to leave not just your house, but your daily life? How do you compress 32 years of love into sentences that won't embarrass her or make her feel guilty for growing up and growing away? I keep thinking about the morning you were born, how the nurse placed you in my arms, and you looked at me with those serious, dark eyes, as if you were trying to figure out who I was and whether you approved. Your mother was sleeping, exhausted from 18 hours of labour, and it was just you and me in that quiet hospital room with the early morning light streaming through the windows. I hummed to you. I don't even remember what song, and you seemed to listen, your tiny fingers wrapped around my thumb like you were already trying to hold on. I have been holding on ever since. I held on through your first steps when you toddled across this very room toward the piano, your chubby hands reaching for the keys that were still too high for you to reach. I held on through your first day of school when you marched up to that big brick building with your new backpack and your chin held high. Too proud to let me see that you were nervous. I held on through your teenage years when you thought I didn't understand anything about your world. When you would roll your eyes at my jokes and slam your bedroom door when I asked too many questions about where you were going and when you'd be home. And I held on through your college years, when phone calls became brief and visits became rushed. When I learned to compress 4 years of parenting into Christmas breaks and summer weekends. I held on when you called to tell me about David, hearing in your voice a happiness I had never heard before, a completeness that told me you had found something I couldn't give you. I held on when you brought him home to meet me, watching him look at you the way I used to look at your mother, knowing that my role in your life was about to change in ways I wasn't sure I was ready for. But tomorrow, I have to let go. Not completely. I know you will always be my daughter, that there will always be holidays and phone calls and grandchildren someday, God willing. But I have to let go of being the most important man in your life, the one you turn to first when something wonderful happens, or when the world feels too heavy to carry alone. I have to let go of being your protector, your advisor, your safe harbor in every storm. I have to let go of tucking you in at night and checking on you when you're sick and knowing where you are at every moment of every day. I have to let go of being the person who knows all your fears and dreams and secrets, because you will share those with David now, as you should. This is what I wanted, what your mother and I worked toward from the day you were born, raising you to be strong enough and wise enough and loved enough to make your own life, to choose your own path, to find your own happiness. But knowing that this was always the goal doesn't make it easier to watch you walk toward it. So let me tell you some things I want you to remember. Things I may not get the chance to say once you're caught up in the beautiful chaos of building a marriage and maybe a family of your own. Remember that you are braver than you think you are. I have watched you face every challenge with a quiet courage that amazes me. From the time you fell off your bike at age 6 and got back on with skinned knees and tears in your eyes, to the time you changed your major junior year because you realized your heart wasn't in pre-med, even though you were afraid of disappointing us. You have never let fear make your decisions for you. And that strength will serve you well in marriage, where courage is required not just in the big moments, but in the small daily choice to keep choosing each other. Remember that you come from love. Your mother and I didn't have a perfect marriage, no one does, but what we had was real and deep and strong enough to create you. Even after she died, that love didn't disappear. It lives in you, in the way you care for people, in the way you listen with your whole heart, in the way you can find something beautiful in the most ordinary day. You know how to love because you were loved, completely and without reservation, from your very first breath. Remember that home is not just a place, but a feeling. This house will always be here for you. Not just the building, but the sanctuary it represents. When the world feels too loud or too harsh or too complicated, when marriage feels hard or life feels uncertain, remember that you have a place where you are known and loved and welcomed exactly as you are. The door will never be locked to you. The light will always be on. But most importantly, remember that letting you go is not the same as losing you. You will always be the little girl who sat beside me on this piano bench, trying to reach the pedals with your short legs, humming along while I played your favourite songs. You will always be the teenager who would curl up in my chair while I read the Sunday paper, pretending to be too old for snuggling, but never quite moving away. You will always be my daughter, my pride, my joy, my greatest accomplishment. The love I have for you is not something that can be transferred or replaced or diminished by the love you give to David. It exists in its own space, complete and eternal, like a song that plays forever once it's been written. Nothing can change it, not distance or time or new relationships or old disappointments. It simply is, the way the sun is, the way music is, the way home is. I had planned to give you this letter before the ceremony tomorrow, maybe while you're getting ready or during those quiet moments before you walk down the aisle. But sitting here now, listening to the house settle around us one last time with you sleeping upstairs, I find myself unable to imagine actually handing it to you. How can I give you words full of sorrow on the day that should be pure joy? How can I make your wedding day about my sadness instead of your happiness? So I think I will keep this letter, at least for now. Maybe someday I will find the right moment to share it, when enough time has passed that you can read it without feeling guilty for growing up, without worrying about my loneliness instead of celebrating your love. Or maybe I will keep it forever, a private conversation between my heart and the page, a way of processing this transition without burdening you with my complicated feelings about watching you go. Either way, I want you to know that tomorrow, when I walk you down that aisle and place your hand in David's, I will be doing it with a full heart. There will be tears. I've already warned David about that. But they will be tears of joy mixed with sorrow, pride mixed with loss, gratitude mixed with grief. They will be the tears of a man who has been privileged to love you for 32 years and who trusts that the love he's sending you into the world with will sustain you through whatever comes next. Be happy, my darling girl. Be ridiculously, impossibly, completely happy. Love David with your whole heart, but save a small corner of it for the man who loved you first and who will never, ever stop. Your devoted father. I don't know how long I sat there, the letter trembling in my hands as tears fell onto the yellowed paper. The afternoon light had shifted, casting longer shadows across the room, and the children's voices from the park had faded into the quiet hum of evening settling over the neighbourhood. 28 years had passed since my wedding day, since he had walked me down that aisle with tears in his eyes and pride in his smile. 28 years of marriage, of building a life with David, of raising children who were now grown themselves. Through it all, my father had been exactly what he promised to be in that letter. A constant presence, a safe harbour, a love that never wavered or diminished, despite the distance that time and life had created between us. He had never given me the letter, but he had given me everything else he promised. He had welcomed me home countless times when marriage felt hard or life felt uncertain. He had been there for every milestone, every crisis, every ordinary Sunday dinner where we gathered around his table and he played piano afterward while the grandchildren danced in the living room. He had loved David like a son and our children like they were his own greatest treasures. And he had kept his word about letting go while never really letting go. About stepping back from being the most important man in my life while somehow remaining the most constant one. I thought about all the times I had wanted to tell him things, how grateful I was for the way he raised me, how sorry I was for the times I had taken his love for granted, how much it meant to me that he had created a childhood so full of music and safety and unconditional acceptance that I was able to build my own family on that foundation. I thought about how many conversations we had shared over the years that danced around the edges of these deeper truths without ever quite landing on them. Maybe this was better. Maybe some things are too sacred for spoken words, too deep for regular conversation. Maybe this letter had waited 28 years to reach me because I needed to read it not as a young bride caught up in the excitement of beginning, but as a middle-aged woman who finally understood the magnitude of what he had given me. As the room grew darker and the first stars appeared outside the windows, I carefully folded the letter and placed it back in its envelope. Tomorrow I would frame it, along with the wedding photo that showed him wiping tears from his eyes as he kissed my cheek at the altar. Tonight, though, I simply wanted to sit here in his music room and feel his presence in the silence, to understand that some letters don't need to be sent to be received, that some love is so complete it transcends the need for words. I placed my hands on the piano keys and began to play Clair de Lune, the song he said sounded like moonlight fields, the song he had hummed to me on the night I was born. The notes filled the room with a sweetness that felt like coming home, like being held, like being loved so completely that distance and time could never diminish it. The letter had found me exactly when I needed it most, not as a goodbye, but as a gift that would last forever. Proof that love like his doesn't end with death, but lives on in every life it touches, every heart it shapes, every song it inspires us to play.